Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in the Bay Area, it's time for Bay Area Business Radio. Now, here's your host.
Lee Cantor here, another episode of Bay Area Business Radio, and this is going to be a good one. But before we get started, it's important to recognize our sponsor, Leah Davis Coaching, inspiring women of color to claim their wealth legacy. Today on Bay Area Business Radio, we have Susan Brown with Beyond the Fog. Welcome, Susan.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on.
Well, I am so excited to learn what you're up to. Tell us about Beyond the Fog. How are you serving folks?
Okay, so Beyond the Fog started because my father, who was the mayor of San Francisco and also the California State Speaker of the California State Legislators, I worked for him full time, and he asked me one day at work, he said, now he's a lawyer in San Francisco, and he said, Susan, my biggest client wants to go to Alcatraz by himself at night. Get it done. Goodbye. So I was like, okay. So I had to figure out who ran Alcatraz. I had to figure out if they've ever done that before. And at the time in 2011, they had not. And I was able to, it took me 2 weeks, but I was able to work it out. So when the gentleman and his fiance were waiting on the shore, the Park Service ranger joined them. And as the last public boat emptied, they got on and they had a 3-hour tour with the park ranger of Alcatraz at night all by themselves. And when that was over, I thought, okay, if I can do that for them, who else would be interested in giving private tours behind the scenes of San Francisco and the Bay Area to anyone who wanted something interesting that was off the beaten path of what you normally see when you come to visit. Now, so that's how Beyond the Fog got started. And that's 10 years ago now. And I do all kinds of interesting behind the scenes tours of San Francisco. With COVID, I'm not able to do anything at the moment, but I'll get back to it once we open and everybody's vaccinated.
So now in your work, are you more kind of the behind the scenes planner, or do you kind of go on the tours too and narrate and help kind of facilitate the in-person experience?
I'm the behind the scenes planner. And what I do is because I'm born and raised in San Francisco and because our family has a lot of connections and my father was the mayor, I can get them into places that normally they couldn't get into. And then I pair them up with the experts of whatever subject that they're looking to do. I pair them up with that particular person. And then they have a great time learning from an expert. And then occasionally I will go on something special with them if they would like me to, or if I'm required to for whatever purpose.
Now, is this something that it's only kind of one-off, special, custom experiences, or do you do kind of where a tourist can call you and saying, hey, can we spend, I'd like a day in San Francisco, can you kind of curate what that would look like? I want to hit a bunch of coffee shops, or I want to hit a bunch of museums.
Yeah. So I offer 3 different types of services. And one of them is exactly what you just said, where someone can call me and say, hey, we're coming with 5 people. We want to do some cool things. We don't need your behind the scenes services, but we're happy to help you plan an itinerary. So I can do that. I can also help them plan an itinerary that might have 1 or 2 special things added, but not crazy behind the scenes, but somewhat special. I can do full on, where it's super special and super behind the scenes and super VIP. And I can do something where it's a special concert after hours at, say, the Conservatory of Flowers, or I've done a couple of wedding proposals, and I did a wedding, and I've done some client appreciation parties in Golden Gate Park after hours at Stowe Lake. So it all depends on what they do. I can pretty much design anything that they'd like to experience.
So now, have you been going crazy throughout this pandemic, not being able to do this kind of work? It seems so fulfilling and rewarding.
It's really fulfilling and it's really rewarding. And what happened was I'm now pivoting to a podcast, and it's called Beyond the Fog Radio. And we launch tomorrow. And I'm excited because what we did was I have a team of people. It was myself and two other co-hosts, Jay Yee and Michaela J. Joy O'Shea. And we pretty much contacted mostly my father's really good friends and also mine, and interviewed them about San Francisco and the history, art, and culture of San Francisco. So I pivoted so that I can keep everything that I love about showing San Francisco off to people. We can do it virtually now with Beyond the Fog Radio as a podcast, and I'm also giving virtual tours.
And then you're capturing that history and keeping their stories alive. That's so important.
It's so important. I really am focusing on my father's generation, the generation right above me, because I want to capture that history, and things are moving and changing so rapidly. It's important to know where we came from so that we can know how to go forward.
So now, coming from a family who believes in kind of public service and giving back to the community, it seems like that's really permeated your career.
It has, because my full-time job, I work for my father in his Institute of Politics and Public Service, and I work he has a school named after him, the Willie Brown Middle School, and I created a speaker series there and a mural project there. Both of those are on hold for now. I had an after-school program that I helped design. It's a program where kids from underserved communities have the opportunity to join the San Francisco Boys Chorus. So I co-founded and ran that for 12 years. And now I created an education program for kids to go back to school, but outside. And I'm going to share that with Superintendent Thurman's office very soon.
Now, is that something that you're seeing? Maybe that's where there's a big opportunity for folks to give back. Is that because of the pandemic, a lot of kids are kind of being left behind when it comes to the arts and getting opportunities to really participate and create like maybe they had previously?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not familiar with a lot of the programs, to be very honest with you, that are happening, but I know that the huge concern, especially in underserved neighborhoods, is kids can't necessarily get on Zoom. And if their parents are essential workers, they're home by themselves all day long and they can't get on Zoom because they have no connectivity. Even if they have a computer, they don't have any connectivity and they're not doing anything face to face. And I was lucky enough to go to alternative schools in the 60s and 70s. And alternative education back then was really inventive. And so I took that model of my upbringing and I just made a plan where people are learning outside. Kids are learning outside in small groups. So I'm hoping that the superintendent will embrace my idea.
Now, you also do work as a documentary film director and a photographer. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I did a film that we still have not edited yet, but I was invited by the San Francisco Bayview Opera House. They have a program in Bayview Hunters Point, and they invited me to follow the kids. There's 10 kids, and at the time they were age 10, to Senegal and Paris, and they all got chosen because of their artwork. And they had an art gallery opening in Paris, and they had an art gallery opening in Senegal. And my company then, Living Dream Films, we toured with them and we had an amazing time. But that was a while ago. And then my photography is documentary style photography. And I do people's portraits, but they're the kind of portraits that aren't your typical portraits. I get very close. Well, now with COVID, I would have to use a stronger lens, but I can still get very close. And I start talking to them about the things they love in their lives. And then I click away and capture a moment that you would normally only see when you're at dinner or at the theater or having a great time. I sort of capture that really special moment in someone's portrait. So I traveled to India and I did some wonderful photographs. India is one of my favorite countries, and I just took amazing photos in India because it's such a wonderful, spiritually drawn country. So that's all on my website, which is SusanEBrownPhotography.com.
So now, how do you manage all these different interests? It sounds like there's never a dull moment in your life.
Well, I kind of I focus, believe it or not, I do focus on one thing at a time. And I'm able to do that, especially in COVID, because there's not a lot of movement right now. If we weren't in COVID, I probably would be losing my mind because everyone would be saying yes to so many things. But things are going a little bit slow because of COVID. So the podcast has been, since September, the podcast has been my number one priority. And then every other Tuesday, I sit in my friend's backyard and I'm writing a screenplay that's going really well. And it's a very nice activity. And then on Fridays, I work on the Willie Brown Fellowship at San Francisco State, and that's part of my everyday job.
Now, any advice for folks out there that have a lot of interest like you do in order to kind of manage their time better and to get the most out of this pause that we're all going through via the pandemic?
What I would say is this. I take, for my mental health, I take yoga every single day. And I do meditation as often as I can. And with the yoga, that's from 6 to 7 every day. And I do not waver on that. That's a hardcore thing that I do. And that's my schedule. That's my hardcore schedule. And then I schedule everything else around that. Wednesdays is podcast day. So again, that's another hardcore schedule. And when you have a schedule where you have actual things that are scheduled, then you start to get things done in a productive way. Because when you're in just idling and not knowing what to do, you can wake up at 9 and all of a sudden it's 6 and the whole day is gone and you haven't gotten much done, but you sat around worrying about the pandemic. But when you have an actual schedule like you did before the pandemic, even though it's in your own house, you can move from room to room and go, okay, I'm going on my walk now. Okay, I have yoga at 6. What do I want to get done before yoga? Well, I have to work on the podcast. And then Tuesday, I get to go in Tamara's backyard and write. And then Wednesday is podcast recording day. So that's kind of how I've split that. And that's what's kept me motivated and interested in everything that I'm doing and not fall into depression or despair because of the pandemic and everything else that's going on, which is, we're kind of in a unique, phenomenal time. So we have a chance to reinvent ourselves to whatever we want to do, as long as we stay in a very happy mood.
Well, congratulations on all the success. You're doing important work, and we appreciate you. If somebody wants to learn more about what you're up to, whether it's the photography, the tours, the podcast, what are some of the websites where people can find your work?
So they can find my work for the tours on beyondthefog.com there's dashes in between each word. They can find out about the photography from SusanEBrownPhotography.com. And Beyond the Fog Radio is BeyondTheFogRadio.com. And it's live tomorrow. And it's our first podcast is launching literally tomorrow. So those are the three best places to find me.
Well, Susan, thank you so much for sharing your story today.
Thank you so much as well. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
All right. This is Lee Cantor. We will see you all next time on Bay Area Business Radio.